Hi, I'm John Crawford and I'm blind. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about some of my favorite things that I learned at the Tennessee School for the Blind that I did not get in public school. So I'm going to name them off one by one. I'm going to start with orientation and mobility. Now, in several of my videos, I've talked about orientation and mobility, or what we call O&M. And what that is, for those who haven't been around, is a course that you take when you are blind or visually impaired that teaches you how to navigate in a safe manner. It starts with learning how to get around in your basic safe environment, and it graduates to more difficult situations such as residential streets and sidewalks, and eventually gets into things like traveling city streets and using the resources of public transportation and using tools such as dogs and canes and other mobility aids which help a person to navigate. So I got all the way up to traveling on foot without the use of a cane. At that time, my vision was a bit better. Traveling in downtown Nashville. For you Nashvillians out there, we just started out on First and Broad, and I had to learn the grid, Broad Commerce, Church, Union. I can't remember all the streets. It's been so long since I've been to Nashville. And then we had to, all first through Fifth Avenue, I think it was, or something like that. But we had to learn all of that. And when you were an advanced student, your mobility instructor would put you on, say, Third and Church, and tell you that he would meet you on 4th and Union or something like that. Or he would give you a specific destination, like, I'll meet you at Commerce Union Bank or something like that. Of course, this is antiquated. This was back in the 80s, so some of you guys may remember those places I'm talking about. And so that was orientation and mobility, and I learned a lot from that about how to get around in my environment. The next one is physical education. I feel like the instructors at TSB, we call it TSB, Tennessee School for the Blind. The instructors at TSB were very creative in coming up with adaptive activities for us to do to keep us physically active. I mean, obviously we had things like calisthenics, and we had a weight room, a full weight room where we could do weights and things like that. And then we had a full track, but we had other activities too, like if you look in my video about blind games in sports, I described the game of goal ball. And I know they had a beeper ball set, although we never played beeper ball when I was there. I mentioned that we had a 2-lane bowling alley, and our teacher also had a unit on trampoline. But she taught us like how to do routines on the trampoline and all of that. So that was pretty fun. But my favorite and most useful thing, I think, was the tumbling. And that's where you learned how to do forward rolls, backward rolls. We did I can't remember what all they were called. They were different things. I got up to handsprings. But what I found most useful about the tumbling is that blind people do have a higher risk of falling, and learning how to tumble when you go down will actually save you some pretty severe injury. It has helped me on a number of occasions when I've had some pretty bad falls. So tumbling was a really great thing. It was a lot of fun to do it. I used to look forward to that. We would go to PE right after lunch, and I used to love to go into our wrestling room, which is where our wrestling team worked out, and it was lined with mats, and we worked on tumbling skills, and I loved that. I used to look forward to that so much. And then the next program that I thought was so useful was the home economics program. That was taught by a wonderful lady, and she taught us I remember comparing it to a public school home ec program. I think when I was taking home ec in my school, in public school, I think the big ambition was to actually cook something small. But when I got to TSB, there was a fully furnished house at that time on the campus. I think that's all different now. But at that time, there was what we called the home ec cottage. And it was a fully functioning, fully furnished 3-bedroom house with a living room and a sitting room and a full kitchen and dining room. And you learned all of the skills that you needed to manage a home, beginning with some basic simple cooking and recipes, and then nutrition management and all that stuff. And it graduated to cleaning a house, cleaning up specific kinds of messes and spills. Sewing was involved. We learned how to prepare simple taxes. We learned about childcare. We learned about how to make business calls on the phone, like how to call a repairman to repair something in your home. When we were young high schoolers and things, it was a really, really immersive program. I took 2 years of that. I started with basic home ec, and it was a privilege. The seniors got to take home management, where it really got deep into that's when it really got into like the full managing your house and paying bills and the whole thing. And the privilege was, if you did well in the home management class, you were allowed to live for part or all of your senior year of high school with your parents' permission in the fully furnished house rather than in the dorms. And there was a lot more freedom that you were granted in the senior cottage. But with that came a lot of responsibilities. That place had to be kept clean. And believe me, in the mornings, she would inspect every day to make sure the kitchen was clean after meals and beds were made and all of that good stuff. Each person who lived in the senior cottage was required to prepare one meal for everyone at dinner time each week. We were also taken to the grocery store to shop for this meal. The state paid for the food, and we had to pick out the food. We had to prepare it, and it was checked. And then after that, we were graded on how clean the kitchen was afterwards. So we didn't have to have a dorm parent when we stayed in the senior cottage. But like I said, with that kind of liberty, we also had a lot of responsibility. And then there was the Spanish class. I loved our Spanish teacher. She was really great. And our Spanish classes were really small in size. So she had a lot of time to get really, really immersive in the Spanish. Sí, yo hablo un poco español. Vamos a hablar un poco español. Okay, anyway, so yeah, I really enjoyed the Spanish class. Like with the small class sizes, it got to the point where there was just like, TSB was a small student body anyway, and so in Spanish class, we got to the point where the Spanish was, at least for me, so immersive that we got to where me and the Spanish teacher could sit and have full-on conversations in Spanish. So that was the Spanish program. And finally, the library. We had a wonderful librarian, and she was a very kind and I really feel like she really did care a great deal about the students, and she always provided materials for us to read, anything that we couldn't get there in the library. The contents of that library at that time were pretty good, and anything we couldn't get, she could get, because we were right there in downtown Nashville, either from the Tennessee Library for the Blind itself or the Nashville Public Library, because there was always people coming and going. We usually had those materials within hours or days. Those were some of my favorite aspects from the academic sense and the kinds of things that I learned while I was at TSB that weren't offered to me in a regular public school. Okay, guys, if you've ever attended a school for the blind, talk about it in the comment section below, or talk about your public school experience, whether it was good or bad. Tell us about it. Okay, guys, I'm getting ready to hit the hay, so we'll talk to you later. Have a good night.